Okay, so again, this is 106B.4. That's where we're starting today. Pull up the screen share. And here we go. All right, so this is a short combination review, shorter hair. Okay, so when people talk about hair and they say like, oh yeah, I want my hair long, or I want my hair short, or what, everybody has a different idea of what long hair would be or what short hair would be. So this is just kind of letting you know about proportions and what is considered to be on the shorter side. Because if somebody asks for like a 0 on the side and the top is like long enough to touch their shoulders, would that be long hair or short hair? Or medium hair? I mean, what would it be? It'd be a combination, right? Combination of a short hair underneath, longer hair on top. So when you understand the proportional relationships between form and shade in short haircuts, it's going to give you an advantage. And that's what we're going to be talking about here, is to see where the proportions are going to even up. So clients are, I mean, you have to know how to do the haircut, but clients are going to know like what they want, but it's going to be up to you to know which proportion on their head is going to look good. So let's use someone with a long face for an example. Someone that has a long face shape. Short hair on the sides is fine, but there needs to be a little bit of longer hair on the top, or it just accentuates that longness and makes their face look longer. So you're going to have to know the proportion on how high to go with that short side in order to not make their face look any longer. So that's a whole thing with the proportions that you probably need to understand with form and shade. So these are going to be the proportional relationships in shorter haircuts. So what amount of skin transparency does the client want in the exterior? Remember, the exterior is anything that's below, or if you put a cap on, anything that would be on the bottom that exits that cap, that would be the exterior. So how much skin do they want to see? That's something that we're going to have to ask somebody. How much skin transparency do you want to see? Okay, so if you're going to relate that to, some people might not understand skin transparency. So you might have to say, you know, how bald and how high. They're going to understand that. You know, how high do you want it and how short do you want it? You know, they're going to understand that. They may not understand skin transparency though, but skin transparency is more of a professional word to use. So you're going to be tailoring these fades and cuts to complement each client. You have to figure out where to put the volume and the weight, and that is going to, you know, react to the final shape. So that has all do with your consultation. So that's why it's so important to make sure that you do a real thorough consultation in the beginning. So with this, how much transparency does the client want to see? This includes the varying degrees of transparency as a tapered haircut with high gradation or a bald fade, whatever it is. You're going to want to make sure that you are knowing like where the high or the lows are going to be. Partial scalp exposure combined with transparency, or the various lines that you can cut across, right? If we're doing diagonal, horizontal, or curved. So those are some questions that, you know, all have to come in with how much transparency. The next thing you want to look at is how much length and what kind of form or shape does the client want in the interior. So that's the top of the head basically, right? How much volume is desired? Where would the placement of volume be? So would it be like longer in the front, shorter towards the back, the same all the way around the whole top, or, you know, what do they want there? The client's styling preferences. Do they want to be able to, you know, comb it back to the side, spiky to the front? You know, how do they want to style their hair? So the first two questions that you ask are going to set up the proportions for the haircut. So what's left is this third question. And this third question is, How should you handle the transition in the haircut? That's you, because you're doing the haircut, right? Where does the transition take place between the gradation or fade or shade and form of the haircut take place? So again, how high, which areas of the head? So if we're using the back of the head, is it below the occipital, at the occipital, above the occipital? Is it at the temple point, below the temple point, or above the temple point? So where do these transitions take place? And what technique or techniques will you use to bridge that gap from hair to no hair, from hair, longer hair to shorter hair? What are you going to use to bridge that gap? And as we all know, there are a lot of different techniques to get to that finished result. So it's to your advantage to know all of the different techniques.
I want a flat top.
Okay. Flat top with a perm. I don't think that's going to work very well.
Why? It just makes my hair more.
Okay, I'll do it after I finish this. So when we start talking about these proportional relationships, we have to think of form and shade, right? Those are the two things we're going to look at. Form and shade. What is the form? Is it round? Is it square? Those are probably the two most popular forms that you're going to have out there, the round and the square. With taper cuts, we're going to be looking at hair density, and we're going to be looking at the line of inclination, right? So how much shorter to longer does it go? That's our line of inclination. In our fade cuts, we are going to be looking at the type of fade desired. And then all these other things, hair growth patterns, hair length, texture, density, head shape, sometimes even color, if they have color in their hair. And what's the difference of that going to be? So when we're looking at all of these proportional relationships, we're going to be looking at 3D, right? We're looking in 3D. We are looking all the way around the head. So our form is going to be the 3D representation of shape, which is going to be the whole head. Long lengths may not be enough to build up weight, or they may not reflect the shape of the head. So if someone has long hair and they're going to short, you really have to check that out before you just start cutting all their hair off. Okay, so when we're talking about the shade component of this, it's going to be the sides and the exterior. This can encompass small areas like a low gradation or a drop fade, or just like a tapered neckline. And it also can be large areas of the head, which would be like a high fade. Okay. Generally achieved with on the scalp cutting. Lengths progress from skin to transparency to longer lengths, and eventually it will show the shape of the head. Proportional relationships between form and shade within a haircut is determined by many, many variables, right? So we're going off scalp cutting and on scalp cutting. That's basically the two types of cutting that we're going to do. We're talking about the form. It's usually the top, right? That's what's going to give us the form. What form is it going to be if we're doing short haircuts? Usually a square or a round form. And then, you know, the shade is going to be, what are we doing on the scalp to get it that short? So of course, form is more prominent. It's a two-dimensional shape, combines forms with the interior of a cut to create various square, angular, or curvilinear, which is rounded shapes. So in tapered cuts, you typically see proportionately more of the form component than the shade component, often due to the length achieved by using the gradation techniques and the less scalp being visible. In fade cuts, you usually see more scalp on like a medium to high bald fade. You're going to see a lot more scalp and transparency up to that temple peak point than you would like in a taper. So you got to kind of think about the denseness of someone's hair too. Like the lower the density, which means like on that scalp, how much hair do you see? The thinner it is, of course, the more scalp you're going to see, even if it is a longer length cut versus someone who has really thick density. You might go all the way down to like, a half, or even just the blade straight on their head, and it still looks like they have hair because there's so much density there. So we have to think about, those densities of the hair, texture of the hair. Is it fine? Is it coarse? Is it straight? Is it curly? What are we using there? So we have to just think about all of these things when we're getting ready to start this and really analyze that, especially if they haven't had their hair cut for a long time, or if it's someone that's changing a hairstyle that they've had. They've been wearing the same haircut and now they want to go a little bit shorter. They've been letting it grow because not really sure what they want to do, maybe got an extra week in between a haircut. You're going to find that all of these things are going to make a difference. The length of the hair, texture of the hair, density of the hair, what the client prefers, and even their head anatomy. These are a lot of things that are going to make a big difference in this. If someone has a protruding occipital area, it can be camouflaged with longer hair. If that occipital bone does protrude, leave it a little bit longer so it will camouflage that. Longer lengths will build up to create the illusion of a more curved head shape, which usually means the form is featured more prominently than the shade, just depending on where you place it. Right? This first guy right here with the flat top, you really notice the flat top more than you notice the bald fade on the sides of his head, where the guy next to him, you see a lot of transparency here. And we know that this one's kind of a curved or an arc that drops down, but this is more prominent than the top of his hair. This guy right here, which just has a very low taper there, he's more, you notice the top of his hair more. And this guy right here this one's really kind of confusing to me, because at the same time I notice the flatness on the top of his head, but I also notice his diagonal line right there. So, that one's a little bit different, but all of these are just showing different amounts of shading and where your eye is drawn to, right? So, because the longer links on these make us go to the top of the head, where the shorter links make us look at the side of the head. So what do these people want to show? And this is part of your consultation that you're going to have to ask. So again, we're talking about shading. Some people might call it fading. Some people might call it taper. It just depends on where we're at. But what we're looking at on this is the zones, right? Less zones, more zones. More zones, you're probably going to get a more refined and blended area. So you're going to look more baldish sort of than you would with fewer zones. So you got to figure out where you're going to put that. But the transition is the area in between. So these are the areas that connect the blends from the top to the bottom of the head, right? So from the interior to the exterior. So where this transition is going to take place is usually relative to the haircut itself. And some of these areas are pretty well known, like below the crest area or above the parietal ridge. But there's some other places that you can make a transition happen. So first of all, when you think about this, starting the haircut, you know how you're going to do the top, you know how short the person wants it on the sides, but now you have to think about how you're going to blend those two areas together. So you want to look at the location of the transition, you want to look at the angle of the transition, and then you want to think about what techniques and what tools you're going to be using. So that all has to do with, is it going from the temple peak point to below the occipital? Is it going in a curved line? Is it going in a straight line? How are we getting these to go? And what tools are we going to use to achieve that? So some of the other locations where the transition will take place is usually relative to the temple and the temple peak points on both sides, the occipital bone, and the crest in the back, the shape of the client's head, and the direction of your fade line. Okay, so here's some of the areas that are going to help you out. From the lower crest to the crest, see where those little red dots are, or red circles, I mean. Those are the areas where the weight will build up once the hair lays down. So how are we going to cut that to where it's going to blend together? So if we're going from the lower crest to the crest, remember the crest is the widest portion of the head. So your weight is in the middle. The interior form will be supported by that weight. If you go from the crest to the upper crest, which is the parietal ridge, which is a little bit higher up here on the sides, right? So here we're down here, now we're going up here. There we're going to have the weight near the upper crest, can generally be styled in a higher style, like more like a spikier type style. And the interior is supported by that. And then if you go from the upper crest to above the parietal ridge, so that's real high up here, right? You're not going to have any significant weight that's going to build up in there. The reduced support in the interior form can cause overlapping links. So, I mean, think about it. If you go too high on the fade, what's it going to look like? It's going to look kind of, you're going to have a hard time blending it. It's going to look like there's, you know, like a little mohawk by the time you get up there. So that's something also that we have to think about. Something else that we have to think about is the angle. Okay, if we have a very low line of inclination, it's going to have weight. The more concentration of weight with longer interior links. Okay, you go to a higher line or a very high line, you're going to have less weight on those sides. So a high line creates less width, allows concentration with shorter interior lengths, and it's less supportive of a volume in the interior length. If you have a very high line, creates minimal width, can only be connected with very short interior lengths, usually results in an undercut when combined with longer interior lengths, and there's no support in that interior, none whatsoever when you go that high. I mean, if you're going that high, you're probably looking at something close to like a flat top high or like a high and tight look. You know, most people like either a low or a medium. There is the high one though. You know, you hear people all the time that ask for high and tight. That just means that they want a high fade and they want it real close to the sides. So if we're going to go with techniques and tools, overcome, usually when you're trying to blend those longer links with the shorter links, you cut with a guard or without a guard, or you could use a freehand one. Remember, there's a lot of different techniques to achieve the same end result. These are just a few of them. Overcome's probably the most popular one. Overcome and guards, actually. So a little note about undercuts. Rise and fall in popularity. Okay, very popular sometimes they're not. It can be a really effective choice for clients, but not all undercuts are intentional. Not planning ahead or simply not knowing how to transition from a fade to a longer interior causes an undercut by default. It's true, I've seen it. Do you guys remember, did anyone ever have a mushroom haircut when they were little? Do you remember that little mushroom haircut around? No, it would have been in the 90s. Don't remember that? No one ever had one, or do you remember it?
My little brother, yeah.
Your little brother had one, yeah.
I never had that mushroom cut, but I did have those the ponytails. So when I never had my hair in a ponytail, it come down like a mushroom.
Have undercut? What year was that?
Oh shit, that was back in the 90s, like
Yeah.
90s.
See, that's when it was popular before, right? And then it lost popularity. But now, you know, now I see a lot. We just had a guy in here the other night, you know, all shaved underneath or faded underneath with a perm on the top. You know, that's a newer version of
I have an undercut right now.
Oh, I couldn't really tell what was underneath your hair the way you have it compact all the time. See, that's a styling option there. So many different styling ones. But yeah, undercuts go in and out.
Do you keep them
Um,
disconnected?
Not when I'm in here. So yeah, undercuts. Styles that go in and out. They're kind of funny. So when we've got these short combination forms, we have graduation and increased layers over low gradation. Now we did this haircut in class. You know, some of you got it pretty big right here on the top especially. So right here with the exterior, remember anything exiting out that ball cap? It's a very high, it's a high gradation, low gradation at the sideburns and nape. The interior is a graduation of long layers for a pompadour or different styling versatility. And the transition area would be about medium high on that, creating a wedge type shape. Okay, when we get to this next one, and as you can see on the sides, you know, it kind of goes out a little bit. So that is giving you that wedge type shape. More than this one, the exterior on here is a medium high gradation. Medium gradation at sides, perimeter, and nape, which it is shorter, right, around the sides and around the perimeter and the nape, but it does blend a little bit higher. The top up here is the interior. It's gradation. It has square layers along a diagonal plane and a side part. And then the transition area in between that is a high gradation through the upper crest and sides. Medium high gradation through the back, which just means that we have to blend it. Let me tell her she's going in the wrong room. So then when we go with this uniform layers over gradation, that one's going to be a little bit different here. Hey, Crystal, you need to go to Miss Janie's theory, hun. Wrong class.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so this one right here, it's high, right? You can see that the fade there is a little bit higher. It's a little bit more tapered around the edges there with a little bit of a higher fade, tapered at the sideburns and nape. The interior there is definitely just a plain layered haircut, uniformly layered haircut at the top. Just a nice rectangle straight through the top there. And then the transition area there is high gradation through the upper crest and crown. They happen to use a shear over comb technique on this, but you could use a clipper over comb. That would be just fine if you did. Either way would work on this particular cut. When we get to this one, this is round layers over a drop fade. Right, so we have our drop fade from below the temple peak point around to the ear and then down to below the occipital. The interior in this is high gradation, increased layered form, and freehand cutting. And the transition area is from the lower crest to the upper crest. It's cut freehand with clippers. This next one here is a square form over medium high fade. Looks pretty high, huh? So the exterior on this is a medium high fade with a bald perimeter. The interior is graduation and square layers with a distinct side part. So the transition area here is high gradation through upper crest, dropping back down towards center back. So using a clipper over comb technique. So what all that meant is that it's a little bit higher on the sides and it's dropped down in the back, all faded in with the clipper over comb technique. This one right here is a flat top over a medium fade. So this medium fade was along a slight diagonal line, extends into the crest. So right about, well, it looks like it's a little bit higher than his occipital area. The interior form increased and graduated links create your flat top. And then the transition area is a high gradation at the upper crest with freehand cutting techniques with clippers. And then this is a uniform over a bald fade. So high bald fade. Okay, uniform layers probably with just a guard on the top, just done right off. And the transition area is a high gradation above the upper crest with a clipper with an 1/8 inch guard, which is a number. What number is 1/8? Anyone remember? 1/8 of an inch is what number? Number 1, right? So we've got a number 1 guard against the grain and with the grain. So they went both ways to catch all the hair on that. Good job, Nate. Okay. So short combination forms. This is a flat top over a high fade. Okay, high fade. The interior flat top, I imagine it was probably done with the flat top comb. And then we have high gradation through the upper crest using clipper over comb to blend that out. All right, let's see what I remember. The proportional relationships between the shade, the proportional relationships between form and shade within a cut is determined by many variables. Yeah, no, true, false? Form and shade. I'm gonna say probably true. Yeah, I'm gonna go with true on that. True or false? Longer links can mean more styling options for the clients. Probably true too. The amount of blending done between and within zones affect how seamlessly the progression the amount of blending done between and within zones affect how seamless the progression within the blank portion will look like. The amount of blending done between and within zones affects how seamless the progression within the blank proportion
Maybe the top.
will be. We'll see the answer to that one. Within the, that even just reads weird to me. Okay, fewer zones creates a less blended effect, usually with less. As you plan each haircut, think about the transition and determine your approach to include the transition location, angle, and okay. I have ideas. I'm just not saying anything because I don't know if I'm right. Another term used for the line of inclination of a transition is a lower line of inclination supports more volume and length in the higher line of inclination allows with very high line of inclination. A very high line of inclination creates minimal to no weight. And transitions are usually created with gradation overcome techniques with the guard attachments. Unfreehand technique with, okay, true. Shade portion. Okay. Transparent techniques and tools. Okay, so in my brain, I had 3 and 4 switched. I had transparency and shade, so I was wrong on that one. Got the rest of them right though. Yeah, angle. Okay, got that one right. Got that one right. Got that one right. And got that right. So I missed a couple. So there's your answers. Remember, we're having a test tomorrow. So maybe, just maybe, study would help, huh? So let's
Yep,
go
yep, yep.
back. What'd you say, Junior?
I said, yep, yep, yep.
Yep. Littlefoot. Remember that movie, Land Before Time? He said, yep, yep, yep. Reminded me of Littlefoot. All right.
That's what I was thinking about.
Let's go to texturizing. Okay. Sometimes when you do texturizing in a haircut, this is going to make it personalized for that client. And these are the areas that will just make you, once you understand texturizing and like where to place it along the strand of hair and which type of texturizing to use and when to use it, this will just kind of put you like one step above. Texturizing can be done with many different tools. You could use a razor, you could use clippers, you could use your shears, you could use your thinning shears. So there's a lot of different ways to do tapering. But doing it in the right type of hair and when the time is right is going to make the difference. So texturizing involves cutting shorter lengths within the form or along the perimeter without shortening the overall appearance or the length of the hair. So most of the time when we're doing texturizing techniques, we want to go and do the haircut first and then go back in because people might not need texturizing all over their whole head. They might just need it in certain areas. So what you can do is you can add texture, you can add mobility, you can add fullness, you can make the hair look bigger, you can soften the ends, you can put in movement on it, and you can reduce bulk. So you can perform these during the haircut or on damp or dry hair, on dry curly hair for control to observe the shrinkage factor, or after the cut when you observe how the hair falls and moves throughout the entire cut, or just in certain areas. So most of the time it's done after the cut. Thank you. So when we go to work with these, think about the strand and where we want to put this. Do we want it at the base, which is just a, do we want it on its strand or do we want it on these? I think about what it's going, if you're going to be base texturizing hair volume expansion, it's really good for spiky and shorter hairstyles that just kind of want to fall down. Okay. Removes the weight from the base area, allowing the hair to lift away from the base, creating volume. Shorter lengths support the longer reach, so it encourages movement. Now, be careful with this. If you're doing this on someone's hair who is, let's say, really fine or not a lot of density, because it may look thinner when you're finished with it. You can use shears with this. You can use a razor also, a hair cutting razor, not like the shaving razor, but a razor for cutting hair. You can do that. You can do shears, thinning shears. If you're doing shears, you gotta be really careful though, because you don't want to cut through the hair, but you can do it with the different techniques and the different tools. Mid-strand is between the base area and up to 1 inch before the ends. So it's like an inch, half an inch off the scalp or an inch off the scalp to an inch from the ends. This is known as mid-strand. This is going to give that weight out of the hair the most, gives it more of a contoured effect. The shorter lengths again support the longer lengths to create fullness. A lot of people like this. And again, you can use your razor, you could use your taper shears, or you could use your shears, but I would be very careful with the shears. I'd either probably use a razor or taper shears. Razor, gotta be careful too, because you might cut through it. Okay. And then you have end texturizing. End texturizing creates that mobility on the ends. softens and breaks up the ends to help reduce like weight lines, and creates a specific end texture. You could do chunky, you could do soft, just depending on the tool and the way that you use it. So those are the areas that are along the strand that you can put your texturizing. All three of those areas will work. When you go with natural texture, you're going to have to consider the natural hair texture to determine where you're going to be putting along the strand. Okay, so here's the recommendations for fine, medium, and coarse hair. Fine hair says that you can go as close as 1/2 inch from the scalp. Can be texturized closer to the scalp than coarse hair because shorter hair needs that extra support and lift. But remember, if someone has thin, fine hair, you may be doing some disservice to that client by going real short to the scalp. Medium hair is scalp and coarse hair as at least 1/2 inch from the scalp. And I know that this is a test question. And one of those test questions is going to read how far from the scalp is it recommended to texturize fine hair? I know that's the test question. I know it. So make sure you know those areas to remove from the scalp. Coarse hair, they're saying 1.5 inches from the scalp, because if it's texturized too close to the scalp, the shorter links will not blend with the surface hair and can create an unwanted spike effect poking out through the rest of the hair. That could happen with a lot of different hair types also. So just remember what area of the head you're placing this texturizing on, and where, what tool you're using and what type of hair you're working on. Because if it's spiky on the top and it's coarse hair, that's okay. It's probably only going to be about 1.5 inches long anyways. So texturizing it at the scalp will be great to get that spiky look. All right, so now we've got the area of the strand, we've got the type of hair we're going to work on. Now we're going to talk about the different categories that we can use for texturizing. So there's 3 main categories. There's form line tapering, there's contour tapering, and there's expansion tapering. Now, you notice that word taper again, right? It's used in totally different contexts than a tapered haircut right here. Okay, so form line tapering is known as end tapering or end texturizing. What we're doing with this is at the ends of the hair, we're softening that line. So it's not just a nice chop line with the pair shears. We are softening this up. What we're doing is we're blending those lines out, we're reducing the bulk on the end, maybe giving the hair some more movement. We're adding surface texture to the form and the ends of hair. Now we can use all of these different techniques to do our form line tapering. We can use notching, we can use point cutting, slide cutting, slithering, taper shears, razor etching, or razor peeling. Okay, so razor, yeah, that's not the one I was looking at, never mind. We can use all of these techniques. The most popular ones are notching and point cutting. Maybe some taper, shear, end tapering. Those are the most popular when it comes to the ends of the hair. The only thing, well, no, never mind, that works. Those are the most popular. So notching, and you can do notching with a pair of clippers also, but they're pointed to the ends of the hair and you just kind of cut it at an angle and get like a little zigzag pattern going right there. It's for chunkier texture on the ends. Let's say someone has kind of fine hair, but they don't want the ends to look like blunt, like cut straight across. You can do this on the end of the hair and give it a little bit more movement. It's a great technique to use in the very front of the hair. So you don't do that little chop look and have those bangs just straight across in the front. This is a really good technique just to go in and kind of notch that out. So it just doesn't give it that straight across look. And you can do the same thing with clippers too, if you're holding it correctly. that's used a lot. Now, notching and pointing are two different techniques, but the term gets interchanged. Sometimes people say they want point cut and not want point cutting or notching, and they do the point cutting technique. So those terms do get interchanged a lot, but know that they are two separate things. So you put the tips of your shears in there and the ends of the strand, and movement is from a finger position towards the end. So you just sort of like out the hair, and it's like that sound, and it gives you that nice irregular length on the ends. It sort of takes a little bit more out if the ends seem kind of thick compared to notching. So it's a great technique. Those are my two favorite, by the way. Slide cutting is where you just put the shears in the hair very slightly, close them to where it kind of catches the hair, and you just slide the shears right down the head. Actually, probably tomorrow we can try this out a little bit after we do the flat top haircut and the bald. Well, no, we'll have to probably do this before we do no, we can do it. We can practice all of these different texturizing techniques. But a lot of times people will use this sliding around the hairline to give it more of that tapered effect and longer links. But it does keep a lot of weight still in the hair. Slithering is sort of like slicing, but you open and close the shears as you kind of work your way down, sliding the blades, from upwards from the ends. It is usually used on longer links. The shears don't close completely, so sometimes it's known as effilating also. But that one's hard to explain without just showing you how to do it. It's very hard to explain without showing you how it works. Taper shear and tapering is where you just go in and use your taper shears or thinning shears on the ends. It's usually about half an inch, on the ends of the hair, just to give it a little bit more mobility. Remember, with notching and pointing, you can use the taper shears to just give it a little bit of a different look. Same idea with it though. Razor etching is sort of like razor cutting, except you just kind of down the blade there. It creates really tapered links. It's along the surface of the hair only. The number of strokes that you put on the hair determines how much tapering you have. So the blade is either positioned, well, the blade is usually positioned at the side or on top of the hair that you're holding. Used for a certain specific area. It's real popular maybe on the sides too, like on longer hair to make it come down like that, or in the fringe area to give it a little bit more, lift and texture there. Razor peeling is done with your thumb. Yeah, we don't really use that too much, just because, in California, we don't touch our blade. So but it does give it very irregular texture. And again, it's only for a certain area that you would use it with. Contour tapering, it's usually done with shear over comb, and it's just a way to get bulk out. Soften those links and blend them up a little bit more. And you can use your taper shear over comb there. I'm sorry, not shear. Razor rotation, we're not even gonna do. This right here though is just a way to get the bulk out of the hair. It's basically where you comb the hair and take the razor and cut it, comb it and cut it, and you're doing this kind of thing. It's very dangerous if you don't do it correctly. You can cut too far into the hair, and we don't even do that one. Expansion tapering is usually done in the mid strand. It is performed near the base or mid strand to create expansion and volume, used to remove weight within the strand. So you could do it with your taper shears, usually the ones that are used. See how it's at a diagonal angle there? I think Junior said that yesterday, so that you don't see lines in the hair basically when you cut it. Just remember the spacing of the teeth or what's going to be the biggest difference there. and we want to make sure that we have it done correctly. Expansion tapering is also done with slicing. It's just placed in it. Slicing doesn't work unless your shears are razor sharp, because you're taking those shears, putting them in the hair to where it's to catch, and you're literally just slicing through. If shears are not razor sharp. So the amount of texture is controlled by how wide the shears are open and the length of the stroke as you're just slicing through that hair. That one can be done too much and be kind of dangerous too. Well, they all can, anything dangerous if it's not done correctly. So notching and point cutting are usually done at the end of a haircut, just making sure that the hair is kind of wet when you're doing this. Point cutting especially, because if the shears are dull or if the hair's kind of dry, it's going to pull. So we don't open the shears all the way when we're point cutting. They're only about halfway, and we just sort of go in and take out those ends. As you see how they're holding it, going in the center of that strand there and just pulling it out, where notching is just done on the ends. Anytime we're using the razor, the hair needs to be evenly damp. The guard needs to be facing us, and we want to make sure that on razor peeling, it all depends on, yeah, I'll show you the strokes. Those are kind of, yeah, I don't like that one either. Razor etching though, we want to make sure that we have fluid strokes, not choppy strokes when we're using that razor. And longer strokes will give you more in texture, shorter strokes for less in texture. Okay, so let's see. Texturizing involves creating longer links within the form or along the perimeter without shortening the overall appearance and length. Yep. Texturizing techniques can add mobility, density, and bulk. No, we're taking the bulk out. Texturizing techniques be performed at the base, ends, and mid-strand. Texturizing at the base creates expansion, and the distance from the scalp, that coarse hair should be texturized. Remember that? 1.5. Okay, the main categories of texturizing are blank, 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 and blank, blank, blank. So what would it be? Contour, expansion, and form line, I think. The form line texture technique, in which the tips of the shears are pointed into the strand, creating a zigzag pattern. Zigzag is the key word there for notching. The contour tapering technique, in which the razor and comb are rotated. Oh, that's razor rotation. That's the scary one. Because yeah, I've seen some damage done with that one. Expansion tapering technique that is performed by gliding open shears along the surface of the hair. Open shears, I think that's slithering or slicing. And texturizing can be performed during the cut as the final phase, or even after the hair is dry, or a hair is cut, probably. Faults, mid-strand, fullness, 1.5. Notching, razor rotation, slicing, dried. Okay. So now yesterday somebody asked me, sending out the assignments. Did you get that in your text message? Who asked me? Alejandro, was it you that asked me? You didn't get it? All right, we'll get that back out then, because I thought I sent it, but then I looked again and I thought I not sent it. I had it, I took a picture of it, but I guess I didn't send it like I thought. So remember, in order to get your credit, that you need doing Oh my gosh, totally lost my train of thought. Sorry. So we need to be doing some of these things and sending them in. So I know, Nick, yesterday you were doing some homework. Take a picture of the first page that you did and send it in. Alejandro, I will make sure I get that right now and get that sent out to you. I know you had some problems yesterday getting on anyways, so we'll just go ahead and make sure I get that out to you. Ruben, I know you weren't here either, so I'll give you guys an extra day to get it in, but I'll make sure I get that right now and get it sent to you. Strangest thing, Nick, here's the mirror behind you. And I see the ceiling fan reflected in that. And this whole couple days now that we've been doing this, I have been looking in that mirror, trying to figure out what kind of base that ceiling fan had on it. And it's a mirror. So I'm just like, wow, that's a huge thing on the bottom of that ceiling fan. What is in there? And it's a mirror. So duh. All right. So do you guys have any questions? No, we lost Junior through this. Okay. So I will get that out to you, like I said, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.